What is up, gaming golfers? Yeatle here. In today's video, we're going to be talking about perks, but more importantly, which ones are the best for tanks. Providing some of my credentials for the tank role, I've hit rank 1, I've hit champion, and overall I might have some idea of what works when it comes to tanking. It is worth noting that any of these perks are subject to change during a mid-season patch or the next seasons to come, so one perk that's bad now can be really good later. Because of that, I'll be sure to update a pinned comment in the event that any of those opinions change. Really quick though, if you like videos like these, be sure to subscribe and I'll keep making more of them. And without further ado, let's get perked up. Starting with D.Va's minor perks. First, we have Bunny Stomp, which increases remech radius by 50%. This option is great for funny moments, laughs, and maybe a montage, but outside of that, it's pretty much a troll perk because anyone above wood rank knows to run for the hills when Baby D.Va has remech. On the other hand, we have a perk called Ejection Suit, which grants 75 temporary overhealth. This one is better, and it's not even close. Not only does this give Baby D.Va a longer distraction factor when her mech is destroyed, but it also applies for when she uses her ultimate. This makes it a bit safer for her and even enables an aggressive Baby D.Va playstyle while self-destruct is going off. Moving on to D.Va's major perks, we've got Shield System, which converts 150 health to shields, while also having Matrix Restore shields based on 25% of damage eaten. This perk is decent when it feels like there's not enough heals and the enemy team has 1 to none beam or melee damage types. This isn't a very common scenario, making the second perk all the easier best pick for major perk. That perk is called Heavy Rockets. D.Va's micro missiles have fewer projectiles but increased damage and explosion size. This is good for a couple reasons. The first is they do slightly more damage overall. The second, the increased projectile size makes them easier to hit, meaning more consistent damage. And third is higher upfront burst damage, making it more likely to outdamage heals. Next up on the tank list, we have Doomfist. He has a minor perk called Survival of the Fittest, where his passive grants 25 overhealth per limb and the maximum overhealth he can have is increased by 50. This perk is not good enough to run. It's incredibly rare that 25 overhealth on a tank after gaining a limb will make a difference. So the only real reason to get this perk is for the max overhealth cap, which typically doesn't happen, and if it does, it's because Doomfist hit every cooldown on the enemy team, plus an ult, all while not being shot at, so at that point, the Doom player doesn't even need the overhealth to win. It goes without saying the best minor perk is going to go to the other one called 1-2. Hitting an enemy with Rocket Punch reloads all hand cannon ammo. This is fairly useful because it's essentially a buff to damage output. Doom can unload on a tank, punch, then unload again for significantly more damage than he could without it. This also helps in 1v1s versus squishies in scenarios where Doom doesn't open with a punch. As for his major perks, we have Seismic Empowerment. Hitting 3 or more enemies with Seismic Slam empowers Rocket Punch. This perk is situational. If the enemy team is playing grounded and doesn't have a great way of blocking or avoided slams, then free punches is great. The problem is, this isn't a very common scenario. The good news for Doom players is his other major, Power Matrix, is one of the best perks in the game. With this perk, Doom can absorb projectiles for the first second of its duration. This means for 1 second, he's immune to most damage types, similar to D.Va's defense matrix. Let's talk about our next tank, Hazard. He has a perk called Reconstitution, which makes it so that jagged wall hits charge Spike Guard with 25 energy, up to 50 extra. Basically, there's potential for an extra half a second to block. It could clutch up, but the chance for it to make a difference is indeed minor. His other perk, Off the Top, does 30% increased damage to heroes above 250 HP, so that affects every tank and a handful of chunky DPS. This is damage that can win you a duel and or force an enemy out sooner. The only time I wouldn't recommend this perk is if the enemy team has no chunker DPS and the tank is one you rarely get close to, like a Mauga or something, because that makes the perk useless. On the major side of things, we have Anarchic Zeal, which gives Hazard Block 25% lifesteal, and I'm just gonna say this perk is bait. You can lifesteal from 2 enemies at the same time, and it's still not enough healing to outsustain some of the weaker damage outputs like Winston's Tesla Cannon. With that being said, the easy pick is Deep Leap. This perk gives Hazard's Leap a 20% range increase. To put that into perspective, you can reach a target 20% sooner. If you're running away, 20% might get you out of safety you otherwise wouldn't reach, and if you're respawning, 20% will absolutely get you back to the fight faster. In short, mobility OP and is the best option. Mauga Gaming. Kinetic Bandolier reloads up to 150 ammo while Mauga is charging. In the perfect circumstance, this perk can win a Mauga mirror, but in general, the best use for it is when a target is really low and reload would just take too long, so that's when charge then cancel can make a difference. This could reasonably happen about once a game, so it's not quite useless, but it's pretty close to it. As for the other option, we have 2 hearts. This perk counts Mauga as 2 players when on the objective and also heals him while he's there. Quick maths, if Mauga sits on the objective for 5 seconds, that's 100 healing. Quicker capture progress is also nice, and so this perk is objectively better. Moving on to majors, we have Combat Fuel. Critical hits grant Mauga 2 temporary overhealth on Cardiac Overdrive's next use, capping at 100 maximum overhealth. This perk is actually good. Its best use case is in games where the enemy tank is free to shoot because then the overhealth farms quick. This will definitely win Mauga mirrors and sometimes win other exchanges. The second perk is Firewalker. Overrun ignites enemies' hits. If you're a backline Mauga, then this option is the best one for you. Not only is the run-through damage insane, but it also makes it easier to insta-crit enemies. Combat Fuel is better when there's a tank to shoot, but in most cases, Firewalker will be the go-to. Battle Cattle has a perk called Fleeting Bulwark. Fortify briefly grants an additional 100 overhealth when activated. This is good for offensive pushes and good for defensive pulling. It's a pretty safe perk to pick, and it's especially good if your main goal is to live and distract. The second minor perk is Heat Dissipator. Primary fire critical hits, refund heat. This perk is slept on. All you have to do is aim your crosshair at head level, move it side to side, and you pretty much get extra ammo. If your aim is maximum potato and you struggle to do that, then this perk probably isn't for you. It's also worth noting this perk stops being as good when the enemy team has a lot of vertical movement, because at that point, tracking headshots is the last thing any Orisa player is doing. But besides that, definitely her best minor perk. Now for Orisa's major perks, we have the good old Protective Barrier. If the enemy team has weak shield pressure, this perk is very good for all the reasons a shield is good. It blocks damage, blocks cooldowns, and blocks most supports from being able to heal. Charge Javelin increases speed and knockback the longer you hold it, and also pierces enemies, meaning you can impale the entire enemy team if the lineup is just right. Montage potential aside, increased speed makes it easier to land, and the increased knockback just helps disrupt enemy positioning and can even lead to more punishes. With that being said, a little more than half the time, teams will be able to break shield rather quickly. So, for that reason, perk number 2 is the best bang for your buck. Pyunker Queen has this perk called Rending Recall. Recalling a jagged blade from a stuck target refreshes its wound. This gives about a regular melee's worth of damage and a little extra healing. This perk is weak, but a not so weak perk is Battle Shout. Commanding Shout fully reloads Scattergun and increases allied reload speed by 50%. Having a near instant reload offers more damage than the first perk by miles, and the faster reload for allies is just a very nice bonus. Battle Shout is just better. The first major perk I want to talk about is Deep Wounds. Scattergun hits extend the wound duration on those enemies by 0.5 seconds. One might be fooled into thinking this is really strong, but in reality, it only procs once per target, and 0.5 wound extension with any ability roughly translates to less than 15 extra healing and even less damage. In my opinion, don't even bother with this one. So that leaves us with the only other option, Savage Satiation? I don't know, man. Carnage impact damage gains 100% lifesteal. This translates to 105 insta healing per target. Overall, great choice and pretty much the only choice, so there you have it. Next up, we have Ramattra. Prolonged Barrier increases Void Barrier's duration and size by 25%. This perk needs no further explanation, it's solid. The only problem is, the other perk is better. Allow me to introduce Void Surge. Void Surge periodically releases a burst of 6 additional projectiles during continuous fire. Every time there's a burst, that's around 30 damage, which is 1v1 winning damage. So if you trust your aim even a little, then this is the best option. On the topic of options, Nanite Repair. Ramattra is healed for 50 health per second while within Ravenous Vortex. This can total up to 150 healing, making it great for brawly and close quarter games. It's also the perk that's going to give the edge in the Ramattra 1v1s. Option 2 is Vengeful Vortex. While Ravenous Vortex is airborne, use E again to detonate it, dealing 50 damage and pulling enemies downward. This perk does a great job at covering what the other perk doesn't do, which is give you a better option in the longer range poking games. But if I had to pick a best, I'd say this one just because it's cooler. Really, both of these perks are great, and it just depends on the type of problem that needs to be solved. Reinhardt has this one perk called Fury Uptake, where Barrier Field is healed for 100% of Fire Strike's damage dealt. This would be a decent perk if it healed for double what it does, but it doesn't, so it's just a weak perk. His other minor perk, Crusader's Resolve, makes it so that while using Barrier, passive health regeneration is triggered 50% sooner. Good perk, pick this every time. There's a lot of different scenarios to use it in, but the best will probably be when you charge, take damage while charging, and then shield up to get the healing going. Now for the major perks, we have Crushing Victory. Charge damage grants temporary overhealth for 50% of damage dealt. It goes without saying this perk relies on your ability to hit charges. So versus teams that are very mobile or maps where Reinhardt is easy to avoid, don't bother. But it's something worth going for against easy to pin tanks like D.Va, because that's a free 150 overhealth, and obviously a lot of damage. The other major perk is Shield Slam. When shield is active, use primary fire to damage and knock back enemies. The best thing about this perk is you can use it as a combo finisher to kill most squishies. It also has the added benefit of keeping people from getting behind your shield, and it has some environmental potential. Again, both of these major perks have their moments, but Shield Slam might be a slightly better overall pick since it always has potential, whereas the Charge perk has variables to consider. Hog Toss is a perk that increases Pigpen's throw range by 50% and as of recently increases the damage by 25%. The throw distance is a bit niche, but the extra damage makes hook comboing a bit more consistent, so I wouldn't call it the worst perk in the game. His other perk isn't too flashy either, but it's definitely solid. That perk is called Scrap Hook, and makes it so that chain hook refunds 2 ammo. This is good because sometimes you gotta shoot then hook. It's also a must pick in the Hog 1v1s because those sometimes come down to an awkward reload timing. As for his major perks, we have Hydrogen Exposure. This makes it so that Take a Breather also heals nearby allies for 50% of its healing. This is a good perk for when flanking seems less viable or when the team needs help surviving dives. On the opposite end, we have Invigorate. Take a Breather rapidly increases Roadhog's movement speed by 30%. This is a phenomenal perk that enables Roadhog to rotate quicker, flank quicker, and run away quicker. It's hard to make mobility not good. Both of these major perks are very good picks for different reasons, but Invigorate better flows with Roadhog's playstyle. Massive Impact is a Sigma minor perk where Accretion's knockdown duration increases to up to 3 seconds based on travel distance. Usually Sigmas wouldn't be going for these cross-map rocks because they're easier to dodge and it leaves him with one less defensive tool. But if he hits someone from far away, it's usually a death sentence for them. The other choice is Kinetic Cycle. Absorbing projectiles with Kinetic Grass also reduces Accretion's cooldown. This is a pretty easy way to get a reduced cooldown on rock, and just gives him more of a chance to stun kill someone. It's not as flashy as the first perk, but definitely more consistent, making this the better perk. The only exception would be if the enemy team never shoots Grasp because they're beam or melee, or they're just diving past them. Hyper Strike. Every 5 direct hits with Hyper Spheres, your next successful quick melee levitates and knocks away enemies. This is an ability that I wrote off too quickly as bad. It's actually very good in its moments. The melee is pretty much the best boop in the game because it has a really far knockback and it gives enemies longer airtime, making them easier to shoot. You can't force a playstyle around it too hard, but if you think of it like a better Zen kick, then it's got potential to win 1v1s, disrupt dives, and even boot people off the map. However, what usually makes for a best perk is consistency, and that comes with his next one, Levitation. Activate and hold double jump to briefly levitate upwards. This gets Sigma high grounds, rotates, and angles he'd otherwise struggle to get. 9 times out of 10, this is going to be his best major perk. One of my favorite tanks during this perk patch has been Winston, but not necessarily for his minor perks. The first one, Short Circuit. Tesla Cannon deals 50% more damage to deployable objects. This can help you or your team punish out of position shield tanks. If you don't have a shield to break, then I'd recommend Heavy Landing. Jump packs damage and area increase by up to 75% while airborne. This makes landing damage during Primal better if you're not landing right on top of the enemies, which can often be the case. Of the 2 perks, this is usually the better option. On the major side of things, we have Rejuvenating Barrier, which heals for 30 health per second. This is a good perk because it keeps Winston and friends up, but if the enemy team is breaking bubbles quick, then it's not all that great. His other perk, Chain Lightning, makes it so that fully charged secondary fire hits bounce up to 2 additional targets. This perk is incredibly good. It makes poking on Winston more of a viable strategy. It farms ult charge easier, softens up dives, and is just really fun to use. I think this perk is the better option, the only exception being when you only have one fight to push or you have to anchor down on payload. In those cases, Heal Bubble may be better. Rolling into the next tank, Wrecking Ball has a perk called Steamroller, where roll deals 100% more damage to tanks. This perk wins ball boop trades and can be useful when turning around to punish an overextending tank. With that being said, it's not all that often that balls should be turning around to interact with the enemy tank, so this perk has some moments, but not all that many. Perk number 2, Pack Rat. Health packs heal an additional 100 health. This perk is almost always useful since most of Ball's healing should come from health packs. Shields and out of combat healing already heal him a bit, but the extra pack heals get him into fights quicker, making this generally the better perk. Hang Time is a perk that gives Piledriver a longer windup, but more air control and up to 50% more damage. This perk is very good. The only downside is you sacrifice a bit of speed for precision and damage. This makes Ball easier to target, but the trade-offs can sometimes be worth it. Transfer Efficiency is the other major perk. Reactivating Adaptive Shields reduces its cooldown by 1.5 seconds per ally affected, and ally health gained is increased by 33%. This perk is also very good and puts more of an emphasis on space making Ball rather than do damage Ball. Finally, we have Zarya. Graviton Crush deals up to 30% of enemy max health as damage over time when ult is used. This is good for soloing a team with grab and or just adding extra damage when your team just doesn't have enough. It's often a good pick in Zarya mirrors. Jump Ups just might be the best minor perk in the game. Secondary Fire's self-knockback is increased by 75%. This covers one of Zarya's greatest weaknesses, which is her inability to contest high ground, escape to high ground, and just use high grounds quickly. This is the best pick in terms of how much it increases Zarya's carry potential on most maps. Moving on to majors, we have Energy Lance. Particle Cannon's beam pierces enemies when above 50 energy. This is especially good when the enemy team doesn't have a barrier because then it's big beam damage and grab and choke point heavy maps. Her other major, Spotter, Projected Barrier activates ally health regeneration and increases their movement speed by 15%. This perk is very good when you have a consistent bubble target like Genji or Reaper, also good when backline is getting dove, and most of the time better than Energy Lance if you're up against a barrier tank. For those reasons, Spotter has the edge in best major perk for Zarya. And with that done, we have completed this best perks for tank video. If you like this video, be sure to like it and subscribe, especially do so if you'd like to see me do best perks for DPS and support, because then I would know that there's an interest in it. As always, thank you for watching, and good luck on the grind.